another one is, this is a more this is kind of a touchy one, but do you have like any mental kind of conditions? And that also, in that regard, that's also another point.
So Max, just to jump in here, I was in the ROTC program. I originally went to college on a full ride Army ROTC scholarship, and I was kicked out after about 2 years when they discovered that I sleepwalk. Sleepwalking kept me out of the military. I tried to get to enlist in the Marines when I graduated from college and couldn't do it because of my previous history in the Army. However, as it was explained to me by my commanding officer, to go through officer training, to go through any training at all, costs the government money. And there is kind of a collective well-being of the unit, of the institution, however you want to put it. But they basically told me, you're a sleepwalker. We do not want to drop $6,000 into your education and then have you walk in front of a sniper or into a minefield. It's just a low return on investment. So I think in a lot of cases, it's really just comes down to bookkeeping and actuary tables. If you have X, how does it impact the readiness of whatever branch, unit trying to join? So that was just my experience.
I'm gonna jump in if I can. I feel like we've kind of strayed from Rowan's point. I mean, obviously, great information, great to know. Didn't know close to any of that, so it's good to learn. But I feel like what Rowan was just trying to communicate was how many things were unavailable just because he wants to be the way he is. And I feel like it's less about the specific issues, more about the fact that they are issues. And like, I don't know too much about the military, so I feel like I shouldn't probably speak on it too much. But I just think, it's more about, like, he's a person as well. He's no different than anybody else is. Max, I'm not completely sure why you brought up working parts. I mean, obviously, if you have medical issues and things that you need to deal with that you may not be able to deal with at certain points, it may be an issue. But either way, from what I've heard, Daniel, you were denied doing what you wanted to do just because of a small condition. And sorry, I don't mean to be ganging up on anybody. I just kind of wanted to talk on each point. Sorry if I don't mean to make you feel like, okay, sorry. But yeah, like, I just think it's more of like a general thing rather than in specific. Nobody should be treated differently because they're doing what makes them happy. That's just me. Explaining
the reason why Trump has these seemingly bad policies, and we're explaining how it doesn't have to do with transgender specifically, but more so the things that it entails. If you're transgender, it means you have certain medical things going on that disqualify you from the military. So that's why you can't really serve. It's not like a ban because you're a transgender person, it's because you can't serve.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, in the military, I've heard like what everybody here has said. There are requirements and things that make you not able to participate. But I just feel like in everyday life, people who are transitioning shouldn't be denied those rights, not so specifically in the military, but just in everyday rights. They shouldn't be denied healthcare because of who they are. And under Trump, that is what he is going towards more. I don't know the extreme specifics in those, but I would just say that's more, it's less. specific about the military rather than you should be able to have access to the same things that everybody else does and not be denied those services when other cis people are not.
Some real quick things I want to staple on just because I know the specific trans side of it, even though I don't know a lot of the military side of it, is that by done transitioning, the majority of different military branches in our government, including the National Guard, for at least for Oregon anyway, I would have to fully get transitional surgery, meaning top and bottom surgery, and the complication rates with bottom surgery are pretty close to 50%. So if I, as an individual, wanted to make the decision to not get a surgery that I had a coin flip chance of losing all results for, I couldn't join at all unless I enlisted as a woman. And if I just chose to take testosterone or couldn't take testosterone, for example, people who want to identify as a man but also have the ability to conceive their own children can't take testosterone because that damages their reproductive system. And so if I did not do that surgery, I would be less likely to have health complications. And I can also tell you that I have built so much faster on testosterone than before. It really is not a downside for the military. I am literally injecting muscle fluid into my body. It's pretty score, honestly. As far as people you're gonna get, people who are allowed to do steroids left, probably gonna be pretty buff warriors if I had to choose which ones I wanted to fight for me. But regardless, even though that's totally a thing, I want to heavy focus on the COVID issue of ignoring the issue, denying science, or taking care of the people. And that's an issue that applies to transgender people and cisgender people. It applies to all people who would like to continue breathing air. And I miss
that is a good point. I think we should heavy focus on more specific Trump policies rather than we should heavy focus, on the bigger picture rather than specific policies. So if anyone does want to comment on how do you think Trump had dealt with coronavirus or other Trump failed policies, I guess, or successful policies, please do so. And I didn't really, and also Celine joined, and I would like to give her an introduction. Celine, could you give us your name, age, whether you voted or not, and which party you identified with?
Oh, sorry, hello, can you hear me? Okay. Sorry, what were the questions again?
So your name, age, which party you identified with, and whether you voted or not.
Okay, so my name is Celine Gunner. I'm 19 years old. Honestly, I'm kind of no party, but I'm leaning more towards Democratic Party. And sadly, I cannot vote.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess the question right now is how are people's, response to Trump's presidencies, his successful policies, failed policies, and coronavirus in general? And so anyone could answer. I know Nicole and Reggie were going to say something about the previous issue. If you guys want to talk about this, you guys are free. Feel free to do so as right now.
I would like to talk about the corona thing if you guys have nothing to say right now. Okay, so I'll start talking. So, the whole corona thing, Trump has really done an amazing job with corona. Oh, shit. He's actually, I know it's funny, but I'll explain why. First of all, he's made an excellent plan, very comprehensive. I don't know if you guys remember, there was for a couple of weeks, he was having these talks every single day for a couple of hours. And he was explaining exactly what he was doing. And he developed very, very comprehensive, very extensive plans encompassing when they were going to open, how they're going to open, every single specific type of public place, how they're going to manage it, what they're going to do. the restrictions, like it's just down to the pin. Like it's crazy. It's very, very comprehensive plan, and also very, very comprehensive economic plans, and they're very effective. Like 200,000 people are dead, but you have to understand, in politics, you need to make balances. It's not about the ideal policy, it's about the policy that will help most people most of the time. So you can't go all out on Corona. You can't have zero deaths. I mean, as messed up as it sounds, you need to let some people die at the expense of keeping your economy. You need to balance the two to a certain extent, because if your economy completely fails, like we were actually pretty close to having our economy fail, but if it completely fails, that's going to lead to more deaths than in Corona ever would.
But the reason why the economy is failing is Corona. So if we put all of our effort into Corona, then our economy wouldn't be failing because we could all go to work. And we need testing supplies in order to do that. He could have at any point used his power as the executive branch to declare this a national emergency and say we need to pump up testing production. That's all he would have had to have done instead to do that. Everyone was ready to go and just needed the order, and the order never came. We're still waiting on testing because you're right, some people will die. But if the people that could have died just got tested ahead of time, then nobody had to die, and it would have cost more initially, but we're still paying out huge, the $600 checks that everybody's getting to get through COVID. We would have never had to send those out if we had just dealt with the problem initially. But because Trump insisted on denying that it was a problem, it got to the point where it is.
So I'm going to jump in there. What exactly do you think, like specifically, what policy do you think would have been better? And also, Trump actually shut a lot of stuff down actually when the news media was still saying it wasn't a big deal back in February. So if we're going to talk about Trump could have done X, Y, or Z differently, what are those variables that you would want to control? Would that have been done at the federal level? Would that have been done at the state level? I mean, I think you could probably make a fairly good argument that we weren't prepared for a pandemic. I think most people would be on board with that. But you can't just blanket say he didn't do a good job because I don't like what happened. What specifically could have been done differently?
If I may. So the first case appeared in South Korea on the exact same day that the first case appeared in the United States. The population density in South Korea is 527 people per square kilometer. In the United States, that's 36 people. So the population density is significantly higher in South Korea. There is not,
so I know.
Excellent. So there is not a credible infectious disease expert or scientist who studies pandemics or infectious diseases that would say that Trump's response was comprehensive. There is nothing to indicate that that is true, except for Trump telling you that that's true, in my opinion. To answer your question about what specifically,
that doesn't answer the question.
Correct. I was responding to Max saying that it was a comprehensive response. And now to answer your question about what could have been done differently. The onus by the administration was placed on states to take care of the pandemic however they saw fit, as if every state was an isolated bubble capable of controlling their own needs. But as we all know, that's not how the United States operates. We don't have separate sections of the country that are isolated from the rest of the country. So basically figure it out on your own strategy doesn't work for us. What should have happened is we should have had significantly more tests early on. The test, we knew that this was going to be a significant pandemic very early on in January, 2 months prior to it hitting our shores. And we could have started preparing for it had they taken the warnings coming out of China seriously, which they were briefed on. They chose not to. We could have had much more comprehensive contact tracing programs set up so that we could have immediately identified people who were infectious and then addressed those specific cases, because that's what they did in South Korea. We could have provided proper PPE to our hospitals, which we failed to do until months into the pandemic. We were so grossly underprepared for this pandemic, even though we had months to prepare in advance to combat it. South Korea used that time wisely. Germany used that time wisely. Other countries around the world used that time wisely, and Trump said, we're not going to use it wisely, it's not a big deal, and did nothing. Essentially did nothing. The only thing that he had to use in terms of PPE testing and supplies was already in stock from the Obama administration because they were prepared and had a playbook on how to combat a pandemic. And Trump refused to use that information.
So if I could jump in here, I just wanted to make the point that we had years and years and years. Not only did we know that we should be preparing for this, but we did prepare for it. It started under Bush. Bush was worried about pandemics, and so he started putting together a plan. And it was heavily refined under Obama. They basically put together a comprehensive plan, did gap analysis, they war gamed it, and what they developed was a comprehensive, okay, here's the playbook. Here's what you do. If this happens, do this. If this happens, do this. Trump ignored it. He never looked at it. And you've got Health and Human Services officials from the Trump administration that were left unaware that the playbook even existed. It's not necessarily a lack of planning. It's that we never even looked at the plans. Our federal government never even looked at the plan. And I feel that that's, to say, well, we didn't have time to plan, or we didn't have plans. We had the plans, and we ignored them, at least at the federal level.
And not only did we have them, Fauci was directly telling Trump this whole time to do these things. Everyone was telling Trump this whole time to do these things. We knew these things. He knew these things. And he just said, I'm not going to anyway. Like, it's not that nobody told him. A lot of people told him. And then he said, no, I'm going to let them die. And literal people from the Trump administration, I believe it's Jared Kushner, they said they were going to let the pandemic spread and blame the blue states because they were in higher population. This is a quote that has come out and is proven to be something they said. That's what they were going to do, is let us die and blame the liberals. Because we are no longer about taking care of the people, it's about politics. And the people have to come before politics. Otherwise, it's all lost.
Yeah, you're right.
I'd just like to also ask for what Reggie and Dylan are thinking about this, because I didn't really hear your input.
Wasn't there a pandemic committee in place?
Yes.
That Trump decided to just get rid of?
Correct.
Years it was in place, and Trump dismantled it. And he also refused this mask as if it was all political. The mask was nothing but a political ploy.
Okay, I would like to say that I think we all can agree here that Trump can be ignorant. It's not why I voted for him, right? I can get back on that horse all day with you saying that he's ignorant and his character lacks some foundation.
Well, that's enough. Jesus.
I would argue, though, the fact that you're saying that Trump didn't take action, because in January when he put on the travel ban on China and then eventually Europe,
China,
right, in and out,
right,
he was called xenophobic for.
Here.
Let's just try to let Dylan finish what he's saying.
And the places that it was here, it was contained and it was being tested on. Because in order to make testing for tracing, you have to have the virus to investigate, which is why you can't have testing straight out the door for it. It's a whole different thing. It's not the flu. You have to make your own test for it, and a reliable test. Because that was another problem, was they wanted it to be reliable and efficient to where when you test it, it's not a 50-50 chance of whether or not it's accurate. Trump's approach to it, yes, I have heard some negative things on him throwing out the Obama book on how to do pandemics. Currently, not too knowledgeable on that. I have not read on that, so I cannot speak on that and will not speak on that. But what his actions was doing, putting it on the state level to do, was a show of not taking executive action and not taking federal action on something that is the responsibilities of the states. The states also should have had a plan developed for sequences like this, right? Blaming the economy for failing on Trump is just absolutely preposterous. There are so many mixed elements into the fact of coronavirus that it can't all be just put on one person. It simply can't. Both sides were calling for a shutdown when coronavirus came out. We didn't want the hospitals overloaded. We didn't want, massive amounts of infections. No one knew the real outbreak of corona and what it was until late March, early April. No one knew how lethal it was because there wasn't enough data. The point of going on lockdown was to control hospitalization and to get more data. So I don't think anyone here can argue the fact that those first lockdowns were necessary in order to learn as much as we could about the virus.
So Dylan, I just have one question. So do you think that, just to answer the thing, do you think that Trump did a good job with dealing with coronavirus, yes or no?
I would say that he's quite in the middle. There are areas that I think that he probably could have done better. But at the same time, I feel like every pandemic you look at, there's always ways to do better because you know the results, right? It's in the moment, who's taking action? In the moment, what are people doing? Joe Biden didn't have a plan for this all the way up until late May. Trump and Mike Pence were the only people who had a plan for going forward. Now, anyone can look back on it and say that it was a bad plan. Anyone can look back on it and say it's a good plan. But who took action? Who took the steps?
So and Reggie, you wanted to respond back to that.
Okay, yeah. I also have something to add to that.
Well, Biden can't take any steps. He's only running for president. So it wasn't his place to take any steps. He needed to get his plan together to run, to present. But that wasn't anything that he could have done.
Agreeable. But he didn't even put a plan in place publicly until May.
He doesn't need to put a plan in place. I mean, he put a plan in place to say what he would plan to do in the future, but he didn't even need to do that.
Okay, well, I agree with you. He did not need to do that.
He's not the president. The president is the one who needs to have his plans in place, not about coronavirus, but also about helping other people. And he has a hard time helping other people.
So Rowan, you wanted to add something onto that? And then Dylan, you could respond to, Dylan or Maxim could respond to what Rowan is saying.
So even though I have a lot of disagreements, basically throughout what you said that I would contest with different points, even if all of what you said is entirely true and I 100% agree with it, going forward, Trump's plan is to ignore the virus. That is publicly what their plan is. They are going to continue to not test. They're going to continue to not take things into the federal level. And it's scientifically provable more people will die. Biden's plan is different, and it's literally anything more than nothing. And it is scientifically provable that less people will die. Can you tell me that it's just fine to go with the plan where more people die versus the plan where less people die? I want less people to die. And generally, a lot of people dying is really bad for economies. For our economy, for the job market I'm about to enter into, I am terrified. Are you kidding? I would love the economy to be great. You know what I think would be really great is if rich people would give us some of their money so we could start spending it again. If they would actually just trickle it down, then we wouldn't even need socialism if they would just give it back.
I think we're gonna detour a little bit.
I would argue that it is trickling down by employing you personally. Right.
Let's not talk about the trickle down stuff, but his first point about the difference in the two plans, Maxim and Dylan, do you guys have something to say to that?
Let's focus on the first half of what I said about more or less people dying.
I would say that no one knows for sure how many people are going to die with either plan. You can project, and every single projection has changed of coronavirus. It was originally projected back in March that 2.2 million people were going to die. Have 2.2 million people died? No. 210,000 people. Is that too big of a number? Yes. But you can't determine whether or not that's all Trump's fault. In fact, it's not all Trump's fault. This was a lethal disease. It was extremely contagious. And luckily, we got the Europe strand and not the China strand. Because we got the original Chinese strand, it was more lethal, less infectious, but more lethal, and more deaths would have occurred. I think Maxim had something you want to say.
I mean, just predict.
Let's let Maxim say something, and then if you want to respond, we'll see if we could have time for more of this discussion or move on to a different part. Thank you, Roman.
About the whole, you made this good point, people die, people contribute to the economy, that kind of point. I mean, if we're looking at it, objectively, the people getting sick and dying are the very immunocompromised. This is, I don't know how to say this, but this is literally the flu, like Corona-19. This is a strain of the flu virus. Like Corona is literally a class of virus. I have my buddies have had Corona. It's literally the freaking flu. Like, it's just the issue. It's for old and immunocompromised people. And to be very frank, they can die from any disease. They can die from a paper cut. They get staph infection, and they can have.
Can I stop for a second and warn you that you're getting really close to ableism? I would really like to advise against you continuing to say that, just because I do think you might upset a lot of people.
I don't know. Can you define ableism? I don't even know
what that means. I was about to say, I don't think we should tell people not to say something without giving them a reason why that might be harmful. And
sure.
Then let's try to keep it a little bit.
Yeah, breathe, please. We're trying to be civil,
Oh, okay.
I'll keep it brief. So basically, the idea of ableism is that people who are able-bodied and do not have disabilities are fundamentally more valuable than those who do have disabilities. Those who are compromised are not less valuable to society innately because of their conditions, and they still have a lot to offer. And to say that those people are just condemnable to death is something that
to be fair to him, I don't think he said they're condemnable to death, but thank you for the description of ableism.
And that's not true that only people that have been with older and compromised systems have died. Young people have died.
Of course, but
121
have died and there have been many cases where a lot of it's even random and unexplainable. So it's a very strange disease, what's going on.
And I think we're going to move on from this topic a little bit because we were talking about coronavirus a lot. I'm just going to ask for one more person's opinion, which is Emma, because Emma does live in Canada. And I do think there's a difference in the Canadian response to coronavirus and the American response. So Emma, if you would like to comment, could you please, highlight the differences? Your opinion.
Yeah. I'm not extremely sure about the specific differences. We do, I think, have less cases, I do believe. But with the way that Trump ignored the protocols, Justin Trudeau followed them. And I mean, our results aren't drastically different, but it is a lot more organized rather than going out and trying to figure out what you're doing on weekdays and then going to play golf on your weekends. I feel that we've handled it better. We haven't, obviously we still have cases, but right now we do have a closed borders to the States. There are still quite a few people from the States coming up, but there is obviously the border in effect. But yeah, obviously it wasn't a massive difference that I know. I could pull up the numbers if you guys wanted me to, but I'm sure we could all do that.
I mean, I'm also Canadian, so I could just give a very brief one. And then
go ahead.
Talk about electoral colleges afterward, and just seeing how the voting system in general works and how presidential elections work, rather than Trump versus Biden talk. More of the overarching presidential election. But just to give a very brief overview, in Canada, there has been less percentage deaths of coronaviruses from people that contacted the viruses. And we did have a lockdown, and within the lockdown, we did have, what is it called? Sorry, I think, Celine, you're typing? Sorry, we could just hear you typing.
Sorry.
Mute yourself while you're typing and continue typing. That's okay.
Okay, sorry.
So in Canada, we had less percentage of people dying from the death, and we also, while in lockdown, the government didn't just mandate a lockdown and then left everybody on their own to pay rent and to pay for food and groceries. We did get stimulus checks, which are taxable, and people will pay back once they are employed again, and it equated to $2,000 a month, which is a really decent sum for rent and for for food and groceries and stuff like that. And then on top of that, like we do have mandates to wear masks anywhere indoor, and we do have mandates for like 6 people gathering. And if you do have more than that, and if restaurants do not follow social distancing laws, they will be fined for that. And we are allowed to keep. I mean, just from myself and seeing Americans, we're allowed to we're allowed to go out. I'm not returning to some semblance of normal life. Compared to Americans, it's really scary for a lot of people to go out. So I just wanted to just put that out there just to give a Canadian perspective to the conversation. And now I just want to talk about electoral colleges and whether you guys think that is a good way to vote or not. And I would like to hear from Nicole first, and then anyone else could respond after that. And yeah, Nicole, do you agree with the way the voting system works at the moment?
No, not even a little bit. It's, well known the Electoral College is a holdover from slavery. It was a way to get the South to feel like they were still going to have a lot of political pull. Additionally, it just adds a layer of, I think we have a very dangerous misunderstanding of how voting works in this country, and I think that is intentional. It's intentionally very confusing about how the whole process works. It's not as simple as we've seen in recent elections that someone wins a popular vote and then they win, right? That's something that everyone can understand. The Electoral College adds this whole layer of political play to the field where the people's vote then doesn't actually count for who is running the country. I've been reading a lot of economists and political commentators talking about how we're probably actually going to see this really play out in this election. There's been a lot of evidence that Trump is going to try to take this to the Supreme Court and then to the electorate if he can. In which case we may not know who's going to be president until December or even January. People in the Electoral College don't have to place their votes until December 14th. So it just adds a lot of ability for people to play a lot of games and for this to come out to be very contentious. And I think whatever side of the political spectrum any of us fall on, I think we can all agree that having so many elections in a row now come down to tiny percentage points. We're very divided as a country. Nobody's happy, right? Is just, I think it's a signs of a system that's failing us. I don't think it ever worked for a lot of us. And now we're seeing the wheels kind of come off of it. And the Electoral College is a big part of that, a big wheel in that machine. Yeah. So I wouldn't say I'm extremely, I couldn't teach a class about the Electoral College or anything, but from what I've read and what I've seen play out in my lifetime, it's something that allows a lot of power that's left over from a time that I don't think we want to continue to replicate in this country.
I think you don't really have to worry about Trump, taking the Supreme Court, because Trump is probably going to lose this election anyways, even if he takes it. Biden basically won. He's got 264 electorals right now, and he has the majority in popular vote. And we're counting the mail-ins, and they're most likely going to have a majority for Biden as well, just because of the nature of his platform. And about the Electoral College, honestly, one part of me wants to say, okay, no, the Electoral College is so dumb because, the people should decide who becomes president. But then at the same time, I'm like, people are stupid. If I'm being honest, the majority of people really shouldn't have, we really shouldn't have a democracy in its true essential forms. We really do need some form of representation, kind of electorals. But I will say, I think that the Electoral College While it's a good idea, because we have a division of federal and state governments, we need to take into account the individual needs of every state. That's a very good liberal idea that I love. At the same time, I think that the Electoral College has slightly more weight than it should. I think it should, I don't know exactly how popular in electoral votes, how they're calculated together, but I think that the Electoral College should be given slightly less importance. Maybe like 25 or 30% less importance. Yeah, that's it.
So I've heard a lot about people looking to abolish the Electoral College and everything like that, and I disagree with that. I think the Electoral College is awesome, and it actually increases your voting power. And a metaphor that I've heard that I really like is a sports, or I guess it would be analogy. I'm sorry, the sports analogy that I like is think back to 2016 and the Chicago Cubs. The Chicago Cubs pulled out an absolute nail-biter for the world's greatest in baseball. They lost the popular run count than the Cleveland Indians over the course of the 7 games. But I don't hear anyone saying that the Indians should have won that. You get it in chunks. You have to win votes in chunks and appeal to broad cross sections of the electorate. You can't just go after the urban vote. You can't just go after the rural vote. You have to go after a broad cross section of the populace in order to win. And the Electoral College enables that. And if you think about it as each state is a game, like World Series or any sport that plays a championship with multiple games, if you game that you have to win, and the person that wins 4 out of 7 games, all of us kind of, even if you're not into sports, you kind of understand the logic behind that. And I happen to agree with the Electoral College existence. I think it does, to some degree, what it's designed to do.
I think that's a really good point, especially the fact, I think Maxim brought it up, that we live in a republic and not a democracy, which means that we elect representatives to represent us, and that's why we have the Electoral College. And the Electoral College is really founded on one of our foundational principles of the Congress, right? We have Senate and a House, and your electoral vote is based on the representatives you get from that state. That's foundational to representing the country as a whole, and like Daniel said, not representing the urban centrals, LA and New York City.
The Electoral College is not electing representatives like you're describing a republic. It's just a bucket of which your votes get put into, right? It's not like when so I live in Wisconsin. It's not like my votes voted for someone and then that person is choosing who our president is. That's the model that you're essentially describing. That's not what happens. The Electoral College creates an arbitrage, which means that so Daniel mentioned that your vote has more power. That is true for some people, and it's not true for other people. If the Electoral College wasn't off of the way that it is today, let's say it went to the 6th digit. So the Electoral College was decided off of 6 zeros, right? That allocated people's votes, then you're going to have it basically aligned to the popular vote. And so it would just be the popular vote is my entire point I'm making. It's not the popular vote. It's an Electoral College. And that creates an arbitrage when you make a vote as to how much that vote holds weight in the election. And it's inherently going to cause misalignment in both directions. Now, we've consistently seen it cause misalignment in favor of Republicans, but it could happen the opposite way as well. Someone's vote isn't worth the same thing in California that it is in that one district in Nebraska, right? Like that one electoral vote, I don't know how many people determined that, but I guarantee it's not 1/55th of the number of people who determined the electoral vote in California that accounted for 55 electoral votes. Like you can look at voting power in different places in the country and there's gross discrepancies. And that should never be the case, in my opinion. So I'm very much in favor of getting rid of the Electoral College because every single person's vote should count the exact same way.
Go ahead, Margaret. I think you unmuted.
I did. I mean, I think when there is a little bit of extra weight, it kind of goes back to the whole point of the thing. I mean, I live in a pretty rural area. So I live in Illinois, actually. So we're pretty much governed by Chicago. Like whatever Chicago wants, Chicago gets. So it's another reason I don't vote, because it doesn't really matter a whole lot around here. But it sort of goes back to it. I mean, if you get rid of the Electoral College, all somebody has to do is visit New York, California, New Jersey, and Illinois, probably. And that's it. It's done. Well, where does that leave people like in my area, which is a largely conservative area? You know, then it's going to go, if you go with just the urban areas, the reality is it's going to go liberal every time if we get rid of the Electoral College. And then you're creating an ideological minority in the country that's going to be ill-represented every time. So to me, that's a problem, when there's just a broad band of the entire country that feels like they're completely unheard. I think we're already in a situation where everybody kind of hates what's going on, I think. I mean, I feel like that's a fair assessment, that most people are kind of unhappy, but I think it wouldn't get better if we got rid of it. So that's just my 2 cents.
But what would you do to, like, going back to what the previous person was saying? So yeah, let's get rid of it. But, you know, there's a great principle of liberalism. I'm not talking about like liberals, but liberalism as an ideology, that, you know, you need to suit the individual needs of every single group of people. And I think there's a division between this country on a federal level and then also on a state level. So how would you go about satisfying the states in their own individual needs if you want to get rid of the Electoral College completely? Like, I was offering maybe to make it less important, to have less weight, but if you get rid of it completely, I mean, it's kind of not a very good system. You kind of need to replace it with something else.
Jimmy, do you want to respond to an alternative we could use to Electoral College, or does somebody else?
I think if you look at how we vote for mayors in this country, every single person votes within that city for the person who's going to represent that city. That model is already established. It's that simple. So you just have the popular vote. Every single person that falls underneath the jurisdiction votes for who they want to be leading that jurisdiction. So whether that be the mayor, whether that be the governor, whether that be the president, obviously that model can just be applied at the presidential level. So I would just argue for the popular vote.
Okay.
No, I mean, I would just say that on a city level, sure, all the needs of the 25-mile area of a city, sure. But we're talking about a country where we have a variety of environments: rural, suburban, urban, you know, whatever's in between rural and suburban, right? There's a big disproportion just there. And by making it a popular vote, you're completely ignoring more, like, area-wise, like 90% of the country, but people-wise, still 48% of the country as we see the electoral vote. It's just very narrowing the gap.
Does anyone want to respond to that? Or
I do want to say that it's a good point that, yeah, we already vote on a local level for our leaders, and then on a federal level, we can just have a popular vote. It actually makes a lot of sense now that I think of it.
I mean, yeah, of course, like Daniel and Margaret did say their criticisms of it, which I guess just... It's okay. We don't really know the exact alternatives. Reggie, did you want to say something?
I just want to say that I believe the popular vote should be the vote. The Electoral College is antiquated, and everyone gets a vote no matter where they live. I mean, each state, just because it's red, doesn't mean there were no blue votes in it. I think every city, even the small communities, must have had some votes for the opposite, even though they didn't tell anyone they were voting the opposite.
And I think one thing I'm hearing a lot in this conversation also is like how, I guess, Margaret brought up ideological minority and just like how polarized the country is in general, like how many different things so many different people want. And I would just like to ask you guys, what do you think contributes to the polarization of America? I see Emma's very excited about this question. So Emma could answer first and then anyone could respond. I mean, Celine, also, if you would like to respond, you can. And if you don't, no pressure. So Emma, Celine, and then everybody else.
Yeah, so I kind of just want to tie in from what Max said and what everybody said on that. I'm not too sure what the college stuff is. I don't really have a clue. But what James was saying kind of made more sense to me. Just, it's the popular vote. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I feel like no matter what result we get, somebody's going to be unhappy, and that's just the way the world is. But I don't think that our goal should be to make everybody happy. I think it should be to have everybody respected. And I mean, wherever we could go into that, but also on the polarization, I feel like it's not only in America. I mean, we definitely see it in Canada too. Our last election, although we did have parties other than conservative and liberal, they were voted for. It's not like nobody voted for them, but it was mainly just between the two parties. And that's what we're seeing like now. I think the most I've seen for the other parties is like 1.5%, which is still a lot of people, but end of the day, it's not enough to give them the result that they're looking for. So I feel like it's a lose-lose situation. No matter what, nobody's really going to be happy. And with the polarization, it's like it's a bad situation, because if there's only two parties really in the race, then people may be voting just to keep the other out, or just for the one that they may not fully agree with. Whereas if there was more than just two parties, then they could vote for one and have someone representing them that actually more aligns with them, rather than someone they're settling for. Yeah, that's me. Anyone else feel free?
As someone who has worked for the actual Libertarian Party, for a third party, I agree with you. And the thing is that the rules are written by the two parties. The polarization worked for them. Biden fucking sucks, and Trump fucking sucks. But you know what? You gotta vote for one of them. I don't know if you guys remember the Treehouse of Horror episode where Kodos and Kang steal the bodies of George Bush and Al Gore, and they say, well, it's a two-party system. You have to vote for one of us. The thing that is horrifying that a lot of people don't recognize is how much work and how much effort the two parties put into keeping other parties off the ballot, out of the debates. I mean, Jesus, the Commission for the Presidential Debates requires 15% polling from a candidate. They don't even include people like Joe Jorgensen or Howie Hochman. You know, the Green and Libertarian aren't even included in the polls that are then used to set whether or not you can go and debate. I know that the Green Party and the Libertarian Party spend over half of their war chest simply getting onto the ballot. And that's because the rules are set by the Democrats and the Republicans. And unless we're going to move to something like ranked choice voting, some sort of proportional representation, then that's never going to change. The game theory, if you only have two parties, you want to keep it as only two parties if you're a member of one of those two parties. But like Maine, I'd love to see the country go towards the direction that Maine has gone with their ranked choice voting, where a vote for a third party is not throwing your vote away, because if that person doesn't win, you can effectively choose someone else. Your vote transfer to a different person. And I personally think that would be a huge step forward in terms of breaking the stranglehold that the Democrats and the Republicans have on our politics.
That was actually a really good point. That was really cool to learn actually about. I guess like you said, voting, the way like Americans vote contributes to polarization, and that's a really good thing to keep in mind. I guess hopefully that changes. I hope, but that's. Do you think like any other factors would contribute to it? I know somebody asked. They're very interested in where everybody gets their news. So I know news obviously contributes to polarization, social media, all this stuff. So what are your guys' personal thoughts on polarization? And if you guys think there is a solution to, I guess, uniting like the people? And Celine, you could go first, and then Nicole, and then everybody else could answer.
Thank you. Sorry. Can I say about what I think about the Electoral College first? I think the Electoral College should be repealed. I mean, it shouldn't be used at all, but I think, and I say this not only because I think that the popular vote should be worth it, but also that isn't the whole point of a democracy, like the people's vote, even if it's stupid, I mean, you have to like agree with it and go by it. And I also think that we're forgetting about the historical aspect of why we have the Electoral College in the very first place. And I believe I could be wrong, I was trying to fact check this, but I think it was Alexander Hamilton's idea in the very first place. To have the Electoral College, but he didn't even like his own idea because he thought it was unfair and it could be used obviously not correctly. And also I think that what was I going to say? That the minority is at this point, I mean, for the past, like for example, Hillary Clinton, she won the popular vote. And then, who was it? Al Gore won the popular vote, but their votes weren't counted technically. They didn't become president because of the Electoral College. So if the Republicans are the minority in this case, doesn't it unnecessarily bring the minorities? It gives like the minority ideologies in the country more of a footing. But I also agree with, I think polarization also has to do because a lot of people, I feel like at this point, that's why I'm just not into parties. I don't think we should have parties at all. We should just be independent because once you have a party, it's like human psychology. There's tribalism. You know what I mean? Like if I'm a Democrat and I tell somebody, oh, you're a racist because you don't support this and that, or you're this and that. Well, maybe that person is a racist or isn't a racist, but you can't ultimately make that decision right then and then. And I feel like it's almost sort of like brainwashing, especially in this country. It's totally unfair. It's just a two-party system. And there's nothing much you can change about it unless people actually do something about it. Unless people finally say, hey, we should pass legislation to make it easier for somebody to, for a smaller party to have a chance and a say, because there is a Libertarian Party, there's a Green Party, there are a bunch of other smaller parties that nobody cares about, unfortunately, except a small minority. And I think even those parties should have a right to say, but it also has to do with social media, tribalism. And I think the irony of this is that the Democrats and the Republicans were technically one party at one point in American history, and then they split off in the 1800s to become the Democrat and the Republican Party. So it's almost like we're being ruled by one party in a strange, weird way. And I think it's just totally unfair. And yeah, but it's hard to change at this point. It's like, I feel like people's ideas have just been consumed, and it's just overwhelmingly. It's become like the new religion, I think.
For sure, 100% agree. So Nicole, do you have something to say to that? And then I would also like to say we will have to end the conversation after that, but if you guys would like to talk some more, a little bit more like informally, casually, feel free to stick around. So Nicole?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts, but I think to keep it concise, something to consider is in the US, our election cycle is crazy long. Like, other countries do not have election cycles that last for years. They have election cycles that last for like months. And I think Omar and I forget who else is from Canada, Emma, can attest to that. Like, and our election cycle dominates like world news. So I think that really does factor into the polarization, is because for years we're like starting to personally identify with a candidate. We're getting, our country also focuses on social issues a lot more as a way to polarize us, to kind of hide the fact that behind the scenes, a lot of the economics are the same. And I mean by that in the sense of like a working class that has continuously lost footing in this country over the past 4 decades. I know there can be some surface level economic stuff that's different, but we've really become a country that's super hyper focused on social issues as a way, because those we more personally identify with. So then the tribalism comes in, right? And then it's about more than just a candidate. It's about our way of life and our rights and our identity as a human. So I think if we could take, again, like it would be, this isn't the only thing, but I think something fairly simple that we could focus on is taking the money out of politics. Like they always say, you know, having caps on how much someone can spend on a campaign. In some countries, they do things where they allow every candidate gets equal time on like public television to do with what they want without any commercials. So there's things like that that can give people the ability to still reach an audience without needing to spend money. And then I think just having the election cycle be much, much shorter, we really can't undercut what it does to us psychologically to have this stuff be like the top news item for years at a time.
Those were all really interesting points. Honestly, I'm learning a lot from this conversation, not gonna lie. But unfortunately, it has to end at some point. And I'd like for like everyone to give a small closing statement. It doesn't have to be too long. Actually, preferably, it wouldn't be too long. It'd be concise. And just trying to get like your main message across about, it could be about Trump, it could be about Biden, it could be about the elections in general. And just try to create a concise point that you just want people to hear, I guess. And Nadia will be calling on to you guys to speak.
So as Omar said, they can be short, they can be long, whatever you want, but we will be ending soon. So please just keep that in mind. Celine, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I like to go first. Hi, Nadia. Okay, first of all, I don't like either candidates, but unfortunately, I have no choice. I am more leaning towards, obviously, Biden because I'm sick and tired of Trump and his... Do I need to explain?
No.
It's just because I'm sick and tired of him and his ideologies and the dangerous group of people behind him and who support him. That's the only reason why, basically, I support Biden. Like, and I didn't want to, but it came to that point because I'm more of an undecided voter. And yeah, that's it. Sorry, guys, I have to go. By the way. Yeah.
Bye, Celine. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Okay, so.
Emma, would you like to go next?
I obviously, as we know, I live in Canada, so my opinion on this really quite doesn't matter. But I personally, I can agree with some of Trump's economic views, but that's about it. End of the day, I think the whole electoral, it's stupid. It really separates the whole country, and it brings so much hate and just like negativity like to everybody. If you're a Democrat and someone's Republican, it often comes to end friendships. But yeah, end of the day, I think everybody deserves rights, and nobody deserves those rights to be taken from them. And I also believe that people deserve respect along with that. So I feel like as long as you're respectful with your political view, it shouldn't matter. But when it comes to the point where you're crossing lines with people's rights and obviously respect, I think that's when it gets to the issue. But yeah, thank you, everybody. I learned a lot. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Max, would you go?
Hey, Nadia, what's up? I mean, this is fun. Yeah.
Thank you for coming.
I liked it. It was cool. Yo, Dylan, dude, We got to add each other, bro. We both go to UCLA. We have to add each other on something. Do you have some social media or something? Nadia, have you been, are you still singing?
I do, but outside of vocal ensemble, I'm too tired of Ramos.
Nadia, you sing?
Yeah, I've been in choir for a couple of years.
What the hell? This girl cut that down. Okay, never mind. Maxim, do you have a closing statement, or do you want to just pass?
I mean, I like Trump. I don't know, but he's not gonna win. That's my closing statement.
Okay, thank you. Dylan, would you like to go next since you're in UCLA too?
Yeah, I mean, just like Maxim said, like the likelihood that Trump wins is lower than Biden. But I know we didn't really get to touch on it too much, just with media and their effect on people, and just really generally the effect of opinions on people. And, you know, I'll respect anyone's opinion as long as it's their opinion. You know, don't take words from people and just take those words for what it is. Think critically about it. Apply what you believe to it. Right? I mean, on both sides, with Max saying Trump is the greatest ever, there's great, right? That's Trump's rhetoric. On Rowan's side saying that Trump killed 210,000 people. That's, you know, the media's rhetoric. Take their rhetoric, make your own. And that's what I would have to say.
Thank you, Dylan. Georgia.
Hi. Well, it was really nice hearing all the different sides. It definitely gave me greater understanding, just because I am more of like a left-leaning. I'm also in Canada, so it's not like I have a big say in this either. But Trump just goes against a lot of my morals, but I understand the fact that with the economics that Trump does bring to the table, I understand why people would support him for that reason. But just all like the social issues, Trump definitely does not meet my criteria for that. But yeah, it was definitely good talking to everyone.
Thank you, Georgia. James, would you like to go?
Yeah, my closing statements are that we have normalized single topic voting for things like abortion, gun laws, global policy, etc. I think that we need to normalize being a single topic voter against bigotry. We as a nation need to make not being a bigot a minimum requirement for serving as our president. Our president must want to create a country that serves and supports all of its people, not just people that look just like him or her. And the fact that Trump has not hid the fact that he is a bigot should be enough grounds to make it absolutely impossible for him to be the president of this country. And the fact that 67 million people are voted for him when he has been explicitly racist on a number of occasions is appalling to me. And that is the number one topic that I care about, and it doesn't seem like anybody else seems to.
Okay, thank you, James. Margaret, would you like to go?
Yeah, so first of all, really enjoyed the conversation. It was nice to hear civil political discussion. There's not enough of that these days. I don't really have a dog in this race, emphasis on the word dog. I don't really believe in democracy, to be really honest about it, but it's always nice to hear other people's opinions and all that. So yeah, if you're a Biden or Trump supporter, best of luck.
Thank you, Margaret. Reggie?
Yeah, I just think that racism is a big polarizer in this election. And I think racism is one of our biggest problems in the United States. I just want you all to practice love, not hate. That's it.
Thank you so much, Reggie. Daniel?
My closing statement is that we shouldn't care about this election. That we all care so incredibly much just speaks to how swollen and bloated and putrid our government has become. The Constitution the federal government to do 13 things. 13 things. And yet we have allowed it to take over our lives to the point that everybody cares so much, and the government is in our lives so much, And we shouldn't have to care. The government should do, it's not a question of voting in the right people. It's a question of getting our government back to doing what we told it to do. But great conversation. And one last thing. Regarding polarization, you are not your Facebook avatar. You are not who you present yourself on social media. The fact that we can come and talk as people and have respectful conversations, put down the phone once in a while. Talk to people. It's amazing how civil we can be.
Honestly, preach. Thank you so much, Daniel. Nicole?
I think I would probably just leave everyone with, remember that I think when we get in these conversations, there's a lot of U.S. exceptionalism and a lot of U.S. centricity. And we forget that, we're a baby country at, so far the tail end of history as we know it. There's a lot of historical precedent for different types of government, different types of trying things. There's other countries. I think when we talk about a lot of these issues, we talk about them just as our own country, and we forget that other people have tried other things, and we can look around and we can see what worked. And I think, too, having more of an experimental and open approach to things, to say that we could try stuff and see if it works for us or modify it for ourselves. But there just tends to be this sense that, like, we're the US and this is how we do things. And people ask, like, how else would we do this? And it's like, well, there's literally people doing it differently all over the world. We could just look around and see that. So I would say, just keep that in mind when we have these conversations, to have the awareness that there could be answers out there that we just don't know yet, but they're out there and we could get them and talk about them. And part of why I'm an anarchist is you take things and you modify them for your own local community. You do what works for you. And I think we could use a lot more of that in the way that we talk about a lot of these things.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Now I'll give mine. Mine is really short. I just wanted to say that I learned a lot today. Thank you all so much for coming. I really enjoyed this. It was really nice to observe how everyone was just, talking about Trump and Biden and just like everything in Canada too. So it was amazing and everyone was so civil. I definitely want to add that I feel like we have a lot to do and we have a lot of space to grow. And I think we really need to focus on that rather than on focusing on our political differences, if you want to say, because at the end, we all just want this country to succeed and the world to succeed. So let's just, spread love, not hate, as Reggie said.
And piggybacking off of what everyone else said, first, I would like to say this was genuinely one of the best ZWs we've had. Like, considering it's such an intense topic to talk about, I'm really glad we could keep it civil, and I actually learned a lot without, I guess, people taking it personal, which was amazing. Just wanted to comment on that. And like also what Reggie, Nadia, Daniel were saying, everyone else, like, it's so important to have conversation with real people you could talk to instead of your little echo chamber online, on the internet, social media, all this stuff. Get out, talk to real people. And also, again, piggybacking off what Daniel said, the federal election is only one part of politics, is only one facet of your life. Vote in every election, try to make a difference in your own community. If everyone focuses on themselves and their community, there could be a paradigm shift. There could be a shift culturally, nationally, whatever. Let's just focus on making ourselves better, making the people around us better, and let's stop villainizing the other side, because at the end of the day, there's more similarities between us than differences. We all want the best for everybody else. Let's try not to say the other side is killing other people, the other side is morally deficient, all this stuff. We're all human beings and we all want to be happy together. So let's just keep that in mind, any future conversations and in life in general. Thank you guys again. It really was an amazing day.